In this lesson, we're going to look at dividing rational expressions, and we're going to start off with working problems that involve just monomial factors. Now, before we look at problems involving variable monomial factors, let's just kind of review something from a previous course. So if I wanted to divide, let's say, the fraction 2/3 by, let's say, 1/4, do you remember how to do that? So whenever you divide two rational numbers, like these are rational numbers, and so whenever you divide two rational numbers, you're going to rewrite this as a multiplication problem. So you're always going to change the division to multiplication. And to do that, you're going to rewrite the first fraction, so the fraction in front of the division symbol, and you're going to multiply by the reciprocal of the fraction following the division symbol. So the reciprocal of 1/4 is 4 divided by 1. And then you would reduce if you can, and then you would multiply. So remember, whenever you have a division problem, you want to change it to multiplication problem. So always think about the phrase, multiply by the reciprocal. Okay, so multiply by the reciprocal. So the reciprocal of 1/4 is 4 divided by 1. So you're going to change the multiplication. So you're going to say 2/3 times the reciprocal of 1/4, which is 4/1. And then you do the rest of this is what you've learned in the past. So at this point, when we go through the process, everything you've learned in the previous lessons, all of these lessons that you've learned will begin to apply again. Okay? So once you change the multiplication, then everything else becomes the same. So you're going to follow the same steps as before. Okay? All right, so let's continue with this one. So then what you did was you try to reduce if you can. I can't reduce anything here. So you just multiply the numerators together. 2 times 4 is 8, and then 3 times 1 is 3. All right? And then if you wanted to, you can write this as a mixed as a mixed number. Okay, so just to kind of review again, suppose I had, let's say, let's say 4 thirds divided by, let's say, a negative. So I'm going to write this as a negative, let's say 6 divided by, I'm making this up, 5. I don't know, I just made that up. So again, you're going to change this to a multiplication problem. So remember the phrase, multiply by the reciprocal. So you're going to say that's going to equal 4/3 times the reciprocal of a negative 6/5. And the reciprocal of a negative 6/5 is a negative 5/6. Okay? And then remember, a positive times a negative is a negative. So I'm going to get a negative answer at some point. Okay, now let's go ahead and reduce before we multiply. So I can reduce here because the 4 and the 6, they both have a factor of 2 in common. So 4 divided by 2 is 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. And then that's about it. So I'm going to multiply now. So I'm going to say 2 times a negative 5 is a negative 10. And then 3 times 3 is 9. Okay? All right, so now that's the idea we're going to use with these rational expressions we're about to look at. So the direction is going to say divide. Now, remember though, when we divide these rational expressions just like we did when we multiplied, you need to make sure you simplify as much as possible. All right, so you're going to follow these steps. You're going to follow these steps as you go through the multiplication part of it. Okay, so let's look at number 1. So number 1, remember we're dealing with just monomial factors. That's all we're dealing with here. Just monomial factors. So number 1, we have x cubed divided by y to the 7th, and that rational expression is being divided by this rational expression, which is x to the 4th divided by y to the 9th. Okay? All right, so remember, we're gonna change this to multiplication. The first step one, is to change to a multiplication problem. Change to a multiplication problem. Okay? So change to multiplication. So that's where we're going to use the idea of multiply by the reciprocal. So this becomes x to the 3rd divided by y to the 7th times the reciprocal of this. So the reciprocal of this rational expression is y to the 9th divided by x to the 4th. Okay? All right, and then we reduce. So just as before, so now the rest of this is stuff you learned in the past. So if you look at, now remember, these are all monomial factors. So if you look at the first numerator, I have 3 factors of x. Do I have any factors of x listed anywhere in the denominator? I have them here, right? So I have 4 of them, though. So these 3 factors of x will divide out with 3 of these. And so I will have just 1 factor of x left. All right, so remember what that means. That means this, what I just talked about. That means that if you thought about this in terms of x times x times x, and then the denominator, x times itself 4 times, and you reduce, then remember the x's divide out. And remember, when you divide out, you put factors of 1. It's kind of like saying in the past that if you had 3 times 3 times 3 divided by 3 times 3, then these 3's divide out. 3 divided by 3 is 1, 3 divided by 3 is 1, and so on, right? And so you're just left with 3. The same idea here. So you're reducing your common factors. And so when you deal with exponents, it's easier just to think about, well, this is the x to the third. This part contains the fewer number of factors compared to this. So all of this will become 1. And then I had 4 here, so I'm reducing 3 of them, so I'm left with just 1. Same thing here. So I have 9 factors of y here. I have 7 here. So all of these will divide out with 7 of these. And so if I had 9 and I'm dividing out 7 of them, then I have, 2 left? And so that's all I can do. So the answer is going to be 1. See, that's 1 times y squared is y squared divided by, and then 1 times x to the first is x. And so there's the answer. All right, so just like you've been doing before, the only new step is this. You got to change your division problem to a multiplication problem, and then the rest is what you've learned before. All right, so fairly simple. Okay, number 2. So let's suppose in number 2 I had number 2. So let's suppose I had this in number 2. I had 20 x to the 8th divided by 4y cubed, and that rational expression is being divided by this rational expression, 5x to the 10th divided by 12y to the 6th. Okay? All right, so again, first thing you have to do, step 1. Always remember, when you have a division problem, step 1 is to change this to a multiplication problem. So this becomes, notice the equal sign, this becomes, so you're going to keep the first fraction as it is, the first rational expression as it is. All right, and then you're going to change that to multiplication. So remember, always multiply by the reciprocal. So the reciprocal of this is 12y to the 6th divided by 5x to the 10th. And then you go from there. All right, so let's remember, all these are monomial factors. So the first factor I see is a 20. Will 20 reduce with any factor in the denominator? In fact, both of these, right? So if you want to, you can think of this. Let's do the 20 and the 4 first. So 4 goes into 4 one time, 4 goes into 25, and then I can reduce the 5 and the 5 here. So 5 goes into 5 one time, 5 goes into 5 one time. Okay? Now let's look at the next one I see. The next one I see is 8 factors of x. I have 10 of them here. So all of these will divide out. So I'm left with 1 in the numerator, with factor 1 in the numerator. And then we'll divide out with 8 of these. So I have 10 of them. So when I divide 8 of them out, I'm left with x squared. So I'm left with 2 factors of x. All right. Now the next factor I have is 12. I can't reduce that with anything. The next factor I see is 6 factors of y. There are 3 down here. So all of these will divide into 3 of these, and so I'm left with 3 factors of y. So notice as you go through this, when you're dealing with those monomial factors, it gets a little messy, so be careful with how you read it in the end, because notice all those little strikes and ones all over the place. All right, so therefore the answer then will be, this is 1, this is 1, this is 12, this is y cubed, so I get 12y cubed, divided by, this is 1, this is 1, this is 1, this is x squared. So divided by x squared. And so that's your answer. Okay? All right, number 3. Number 3, we have negative 15w cubed y divided by 8x to the fourth, and that's being divided by, I'm putting this in parentheses, because it's negative. So negative 3w to the fifth divided by y squared, okay? All right, so, and there's no reason why I put that in parentheses, because it's negative. So if I had the parentheses off, some of you might get confused and think that I'm subtracting, but you're dividing by negative. That's the only reason. Okay, so then what we're going to do next, and let me go ahead and make this a little bit smaller. So, okay, so what we're going to do next is we're going to change this multiplication problem. First thing you should always do that. So then I get negative 15w cubed times y divided by 8x to the fourth times the reciprocal of this. So that's going to be a negative y squared divided by 3w to the fifth. All right, so that's where I'm at. Now, let's see what we can do here. So we can go ahead and, remember, these are all monomial factors. And I also know this, in the end, a negative times a negative is going to be a positive, right? So I'm going to end up with a positive in the end. Okay, so let's look at negative 15. Will that negative 15 reduce with any factor in the denominator? Yep, with the 3. So 3 into 3 is 1. 3 into negative 15 is a negative 5, right? Negative 5. And I can't reduce that with the 8, so I'm done with that part. Now let's go with the factors of w. I have 3 factors of w here. I have 5 here, right? So that means that all of these will divide out into 3 of these, and I'm left with 2 factors of w. Because I had 5, I'm removing 3 of them, dividing 3 of them out, so I'm left with 2. The next factors of y, I don't have any y's down here. The next factors of y, I don't have any. So you're done. So now all you do is just write the answer. All right, now remember, you have to use something from a previous course, like when you multiply like bases, you add exponents. So you are multiplying like bases here. Keep that in mind. So I have a negative 5 times 1 times y times a negative y squared. First of all, a negative times a negative is a positive, so we've taken care of the sign. W times w squared is, y times y squared is y cubed. So I get I get 5, positive 5, y cubed divided by, and then, so I get 8x to the fourth w squared. So 8x to the fourth w squared. All right, and remember, you always want to write this as one rational expression. And so we're done. So that was number 3. Number four, I have 6r to the 8th, s to the fourth, divided by 21r cubed, s to the sixth, and that is being divided by a negative 5r squared, s to the fifth, divided by 2rs. All right. Now, there are a lot of R's and S's all over the place. So you see how this became messy? This is going to be even messier. So what I would suggest you do, once we change this to multiplication, here's what I would do. Once I change that to multiplication, let's go ahead and do that first. So we're going to multiply by the reciprocal. So I get 6r to the 8th, s to the fourth, divided by 21r cubed, s to the fourth. S to the 6th, sorry, s to the 6th, times the reciprocal, so it's going to be a negative, I'm just going to put it up here, a negative 2rs divided by 5r squared s to the fifth, okay? All right, so now what I would do is this, because it's going to get messy when you start crossing all these out, dividing all these factors. It will become messy. So what I would do is, remember in a previous lesson, we saw that one of the things we can do first is multiply and then reduce. So let's go ahead and do that. 6 times a negative 2 is a negative 12. R to the 8th times R, remember when you multiply like bases, you add exponents. So R to the 8th times R is R to the 9th. S to the 4th times S is S to the 5th. All right? Then in the denominator, I have 21 times 5. That looks like it's 105. So that's 105. And r cubed times r squared is r to the 5th. And then s to the 6th times s to the 5th is s to the 11th. Okay? All right, now it is this that we're going to reduce now. So it becomes a little bit less messier. Okay? So it becomes less messy. All right, so let me go ahead and expand this a little so you can see it better. All right, so let's start with the coefficient. So negative 12 and 105, they both have a 3 in common. And I knew that. You may say, well, how do you know that? I knew that because see right here, that 6 and the 21, they have a 3 in common, right? Because 2 times 3 is 6, and then 3 times 7 is 21. So that's why. And so if I use the calculator to do this, I'm going to get negative 12 divided by 3 is a negative 4. And then if you have access to calculator, use your calculator. But when you say 3 into 105, that's going to be 33. Is that correct? I'm sorry, 35, right? 35. So you get 35. All right. I didn't have access to a calculator, but I could have done this. I knew that this was 3 times 7, right? So 3 goes into 21 7 times, and then 7 times 5 is 35. Okay, now let's do the r's. So here's what you can do. I have 9 factors of r up here. I can reduce that with 5 factors of r here. So all of these will divide out with 5 of these. I'm left with 4 factors of r. Over here, I have 5 factors of s. All of those will divide out with 5 of these. And so when I reduce 5 factors of s with these 11 here, I am left with 6 factors of s. So see, it became a little bit less messy than if I had done that here. So therefore, the answer is going to be negative 4 r to the 4th divided by, and that looks like 35 s to the 6th. And there's your answer. Okay? All right, so that was number 4. All right, and then let's do one more with this. So that's number 5. And we're not doing as many with this one because once you change it to multiplication, the rest is the lessons that we've done before. So the only thing that you really need to know is that when you change a division, when you're dividing rational expressions, you need to first of all change it to a multiplication problem. All right, so here let's do one more. So we have this rational expression being divided by this one. All right, and that's negative 6 in the denominator. All right, so we have this rational expression. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to change this to multiplication. Once you change to multiplication, everything is what you've done before. So this becomes 12x to the 10th divided by 4x cubed times a negative 6, remember multiplied by the reciprocal, negative 6 times 3x to the 3rd power. Okay, now what I would do next is deal with this right here. So in our previous course, remember that 3x to the 3rd, remember that means 3x times 3x times 3x, right? So 3 times 3 times 3 is 27. So I'm going to get 12x to the 10th divided by 4x cubed times a negative 6 divided by 27, and then x times x times x is x cubed. Okay? All right. Now, let's go ahead, and what I would do next is just go ahead and I'm going to work it out just like we did this one to make it less messy. All right, but I'm going to do the coefficients first. So I'm going to say 4 into 4 is 1, 4 into 12 is 3, right? And then I can reduce the 3 with this 27. So 3 into 3 is 1, 3 into 27 is 9. Okay? And you see how it's becoming messy? So if you want to reduce the 9 and the 6, you can as well. Okay? Or you can wait later on. It doesn't matter. It does not matter. But let's go ahead and finish it now. So 9 and 6, they both have 3 in common. So 6 divided into 3, 3 divided into 6 is 2, and 3 divided into 9 is 3. And so that looks like that's all we can do in terms of these numbers. So you see, it became messy, right? And I didn't even deal with the x's yet. So now I'm going to multiply this next. So I'm going to get 1 times x to the 10th times a negative 2. So that's a negative 2x to the 10th. Okay? The denominator, that is 1 times x cubed times 3 times x cubed. So remember, x cubed times x cubed is x to the 6. So this will become 3x to the 6. Now let's go ahead and deal with the factors of x. So I have 6 factors of x in the denominator. I have 10 in the numerator. So all of these will divide into itself. And then those 6 factors of x, when I divide into these 10, I'm left with 4 factors of x. And so therefore the answer is going to be negative 2x to the 4th divided by 3. And that's the answer. All right. So that is our lesson on dividing rational expressions which involve monomial factors. In the next lesson, we're going to look at dividing rational expressions that do not involve monomial factors. So those are going to be polynomials with terms 2 or more. Okay, so that's the end of this lesson.